annihilate these voices by dissecting how irrational and untrustworthy they are. Welcome to episode 3 of Designed and Delivered for Destiny. I'm your host, Nicole Cherie. I'm a wife, author, life coach, business owner, and speaker. I've been a mental health therapist for over 10 years, and now I want to bring the conversations from my office and bring it to you wherever you are. Each episode, we will discuss various topics related to your design, your deliverance, or your destiny. I'm glad you've taken time out of your busy schedule to tune in, so let's jump on in. One of you responded to my poll on Spotify asking, what would you like me to discuss next? And you responded that you would like me to discuss obstacles to your calling. So I want to start addressing that this week. And the first obstacle we will be talking about is voices. Now, you may have heard people talk about voices and its impact on your ability to move forward, but I want to discuss it with you in a different way that you may not expect. So stick around until the end. All right, so let's just say that every experience you've had, every person you've interacted with, every observation you've ever made, it's a voice that has in some way influenced you. What do I mean by a voice? Well, those thoughts that go through your mind all day, every day, those things that just kind of pop up and influence your decision making, all of that, it represents a voice that is speaking to you for some reason or another. And it's not just your thoughts. It can be, a sensation that is speaking to you. When we think about, an infant, their thoughts aren't formed until a certain age, but they experience life through what they see and feel. That feedback that they get from, let's say, their mother's eyes, right? That creates a positive or negative experience, which becomes a voice within them. So that voice can turn into either A, I can trust people, I am important, people care about my needs, or B, the voice becomes my needs don't matter, I'm not important, I'm not loved. So that infant can't say those things, but the voice is formed. And as soon as she is able to begin to think, the patterns in her life and the way that she views things will start to match that voice. So many voices have influenced you, but some more than others. And of course, the ones that are closest to you are going to have the greatest impact. So the voice of your family, your spouse, your friends, but every interaction, everything that you do with them, everything that they've said to you, everything that they didn't say, every look that they gave, every look that they did not give when you needed that look, those experiences, it becomes a voice. Why is this important? Because your internal voices are very powerful. They influence everything from your ability to see clearly or not see, what you believe, and most importantly, the condition of your heart. All the major parts of who you are driven by the voices within you. That idea that you have, that view on that particular topic, that's connected to a voice. So, if you look around, why is it that so many people don't see themselves as worthy, as good enough and capable? How is it possible that, you can have self-doubt and low confidence and insecurities whereby so many other people are confident, secure, and just so focused in life? How is that possible? It's a voice that has influenced your perception. I find that this really is the main obstacle that people face along their journey to fulfilling their calling and just in life in general. And yeah, everybody has to overcome negative voices, but how is it that there are those who have figured out a way to overcome unhealthy voices and how to maintain a healthy internal thought life, whereas others are just being controlled? You're just on autopilot, and those voices are just controlling everything about you, your life, your decisions, your thinking, everything. So what I want to do is I want to take you through the process that I went through to overcome this obstacle, and hopefully this will help you as you go on your journey. It started for me with the recognition that I wasn't getting the results in life that I desired, and I knew that God wanted more for me. I noticed that there were patterns in my life that were not productive and were just hindering my success. So what you have to do is you're going to need to sit down and assess whether you are where you're capable of being in life and whether your internal and external life reflects God's desire for you. That is a crucial part in the process. You have to take an honest assessment of where you are. So then the next step, because I am naturally a curious person and I tend to question things for the sake of understanding causality and purpose. So I began to question everything I would do and ask, well, why am I doing this? When did this start? Or who or what influenced me to think and behave this way? I applied these questions to every area of my life, even if it wasn't problematic. I did not want to settle and just do things without understanding, well, why am I doing this? So this is where, I start asking, is this really a big deal if this happens or if this does not happen? And interestingly, the answer generally came back as no, it's actually not a big deal if the toilet seat is left up. It's an inconvenience, very much so. But why did I feel so strongly about it? Like it was this never-ending pattern of something bigger. This is just a common example, but really you have to assess both the big and the small aspects of who you are and why you are the way you are. Now, when you start to ask the question why and what is influencing my thinking in this area, you really can't expect to get the full picture unless you go back to your childhood. So this is where I began to look at the different experiences and influences I had growing up. And I found that probably 70% of the voices that were influencing my patterns of behavior were tied to my childhood and adolescence. Now for you, your voices of influence may have started in your infancy or your young adult years. Either way, though, I recommend, at least for your initial comprehensive assessment, just kind of go back into your childhood and begin there. So as I unpacked both the positive and the negative experiences, I was able to see how those experiences became a voice that directed me on which path to take, how to think, how to feel, and how to see the world around me. Once I began uncovering how those voices influenced me, naturally, I began to feel a variety of emotions. And in fact, as you start unpacking the genesis of your voices, it's normal for the emotions that are connected to those voices to surface. It was definitely an emotional but necessary journey towards wholeness. If you choose to do this necessary but difficult work, it will be important to have support to manage the various emotions as they begin to surface. Let someone know that you're going through this process and that you're going to need patience and mercy as you explore and uncover things that you've never ever really processed or faced before. But just understand it's very normal to experience various emotions. Don't project them onto other people, okay? But it is normal to experience them. When I was able to trace patterns in my own life, for example, the reason why I would put other people's emotions and feelings ahead of my own, and how that impacted my lack of attunement to my own thoughts and feelings, the next question I had to ask, which you also will need to ask, is, well, how do I change this pattern? So that's where seeking knowledge and understanding comes into play. Each voice was tied to information, knowledge, understanding that was false and toxic, but nevertheless, it took root. And getting rid of it wasn't enough. Something had to replace it. There needed to be information and wisdom and knowledge and understanding that was contrary to what was originally planted and what originally took root. And so by doing that, you're giving yourself an opportunity to allow the new information, the new voice to take root and produce healthier patterns. This is one of the reasons that speaking words of encouragement and speaking the truth and love to a person is so powerful, because those words have the ability to travel to the hidden places in that person's soul where all the pain and hurt lives, and attack those false beliefs and information that has been a stronghold in that person's life. Of course, depending on how strong that voice and that stronghold is within them, it may take several words to be spoken over that person for the stronghold to completely break. But a word of encouragement and speaking life to someone, it transforms that person more than you realize. Remember, what you hear affects what you see. So you are actually improving that person's sight. So now that you are aware and you're starting to see patterns, you're seeking out information that is rooted in truth so that we can begin to replace those voices, what comes next? This was the hard part. I then had to choose to believe the truth because remember, it's not what you know, it's what you believe. So part of that process involved me actually having to step outside of myself, meaning I began looking at myself from an objective viewpoint and asking, am I truly less important than others? I mean, are my thoughts and feelings really less important? Then, here's the key, I would follow up that question with, says who? And who gave them the right to determine my level of importance? Then I would move on to the next one. Am I really not enough? Says who? Who gets to determine my enoughness other than God? So I began to challenge every voice, all these thoughts. I'm going to fail. So since when was failure a period instead of a comma? They're going to reject you. How do you know? And if they do, aren't you a child of God, which means that rejection is part of your journey? I hope you get the point here. You absolutely have to annihilate these voices by dissecting how irrational and untrustworthy they are. To do this for you, it may require you to step outside of yourself, because if you've been in a place of defeat or self-pity or feelings of powerlessness, you won't feel like you have the strength to fight off these voices inside of you. So do whatever it takes to begin to ask these questions and challenge every voice, every thought, no matter how small it may appear. You know those sensations that keep popping up that cause you to feel nervous? That's a voice. Question it. So once you're able to do this, the negative voices will start to lose power and eventually leave. They will feel defeated and see that you're actually taking over the driver's seat of your mind and your heart. Trust me, after these steps, you're going to see your life and yourself differently. Remember, voices determine what you see. After you've gone through these steps, this is where most people make a mistake. This is where most people stop because they feel so much better. They feel so renewed and so free of the burdens and the negativity. And so they're ready. They feel like, okay, I'm good. I'm ready to move on. I'm done. But in fact, this is not the end of the process. This is only 50% of the process. It's now where you actually have to start building the habit of maintaining the healthy voices and constantly destroying the negative ones that try to return and take root. So this is the part that ultimately determines if you live the rest of your life from a place of fruitfulness or if you decline and return to a lower level of functioning and living. So what does this maintenance process look like? Well, it's not as hard as you think, and you've probably heard some of these things before, but they're more powerful than you realize. It's doing things like celebrating the progress, even the small progress that you make in life. Anything good that is happening within you, within your life, around you, in your family, doing those things, celebrating on a regular basis. You know why this is important? Because by doing this, you are reinforcing that goodness is your portion. Goodness is your norm. Goodness is your new expectation. You know, it's also doing things like embracing positive feedback, which it shifts the way you think to where you will actually begin to expect the best versus preparing for and expecting the worst. You know, these things are very important. Too often we are inundated with negativity and things going wrong that it completely distorts our expectations and our ability to always see the goodness of God around and within us. Obviously, we want to remain humble and we don't want to think of ourselves more than we ought to, but it's important that as children of God, we embrace the confidence that He wants us to walk in. We embrace the goodness that is our portion. We embrace the beauty of what is happening in and around our lives on a regular basis. Here's another thing that's important for me to say. If you haven't already, you have to develop the lifestyle of giving yourself permission to make mistakes and showing yourself and everybody else a lot of mercy. A lot of times there are these voices within you that say it's not okay to make mistakes. Things have to be perfect. And I'm sure if you tried, you could trace back to where that voice first started to develop. But the truth is that mistakes are healthy. It's a necessary and unavoidable part of life. So the faster you embrace them, the better off you will be. You see, in doing these things, you're actually developing the habits that create an atmosphere within you that makes it much harder for negative and unhealthy voices to take root. You really have to become protective over that atmosphere that exists within you. You'll start to realize that there is no room for anything that changes your atmosphere, whether that's deception, unforgiveness, bitterness, envy, comparison. You have to develop this habit of just asking questions. Now, as you're clearing out all those voices that have held you back and you're now trying to maintain a healthy atmosphere, that internal environment within you, the next step is where a lot of people, including myself, have challenges. So this is where you now have to learn boundaries, okay? You have to learn how to communicate your boundaries and communicate your thoughts and feelings in healthy ways. You really can't afford to carry around things like resentment and grudges, because we just talked about that's going to create an atmosphere for toxic thoughts and beliefs to take root. So we avoid all of those things like the plague. This is hard because you're going to still have to interact with people who may not have done this work. And so if you're not maintaining certain boundaries, it's going to be much easier for those feelings, that resentment, that anger to creep in and slowly but surely shift your atmosphere. Another challenge is as you are going through this process, you're naturally going to want to talk to the people involved, and they may not be ready to have those conversations. So you're going to have to respect their boundaries. As you go on this journey, there are some things that you may not have been taught how to do these things. And so you may benefit from taking a course or talking to someone about how do I communicate my thoughts and feelings in healthy ways. Or you may have to take it a step further based on your situation and maybe research how do I communicate my thoughts and feelings to a narcissist, or maybe someone who is conflict avoidant. So it's going to look different for each person, but it's so important to seek wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to help you figure out how to do these things the best way possible. There's only so much you can control, and really it's your own process, your own thoughts, your own feelings. So again, be prayerful about this process. As you go through it, remember, it's the Holy Spirit that's going to orchestrate this entire process and make sure that you get the results that you desire. So just pray and be sensitive to His voice and His leading. That we underestimate the power of the Holy Spirit and ensuring that He's part of this process. And I really want you to know how crucial that is, because whenever we're going on a journey of growth and transformation, one of the loudest voices that tend to try and take over the process is fear. Fear, for some reason, is one of the loudest voices that we ever have to face. And so whatever fears you have within you as you go through this process, they will be magnified. And so if you allow that voice to determine which steps you will and won't take, it will definitely cause you to regress and, even worse, feel guilt and powerless because you will become paralyzed by that fear. So please be very prayerful throughout this process. Now, there are other steps that you can take and just different skills that will improve your voice management process. I won't be able to get into all of those today. These are just some to help you get started. There are some great mindfulness strategies that are very helpful. But I just wanted to give you a place to start. If you want more information on this topic, check out the other videos on my YouTube channel, and I'll also provide other recommendations for you as well. Now, I haven't started delving into the spiritual implications of these things, which are very important, but I do want to say that it's not enough to remove an unhealthy thought. You must replace it with truth. If you leave that space empty where those negative voices used to be, something will take its place. And oftentimes it's something that's worse than what was there beforehand. So be sure to allow the truth to take root and replace the lie. Now, I want to spend a couple of minutes just answering two of the questions that I had when I went through this process, and perhaps you'll have it as well. But before I do, I thought I would take a second to ask you, if you find this information beneficial and you think it could help others, please help me grow this podcast and my YouTube channel by subscribing and liking the videos. The YouTube channel is also called Designed and Delivered for Destiny. I would love to get your feedback, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment on any of the platforms and I will respond. I really appreciate all the support. All right, so let's jump back into those questions. The first question that I started out with is, how do you reconcile when the voice that hurt you the most is connected to a person or to people that you love the most? And, this is a complex question, but it's usually the most common experience because most people are impacted by the people who are closest to them, especially early in life, which is going to be family. So it's challenging because we are often so grateful for the good that, our loved ones have contributed to our lives. And it's definitely more acceptable to dismiss or overlook their negative influence because, talking about it is taboo. And I definitely agree that it's important to highlight and celebrate the good. However, as I stated in the last episode, your decision to assess and recognize where your voices of influences are coming from, it's not blame. It's about understanding. It's like, when you describe a bruise on your leg from playing sports at a young age, you give the details, that the other player pushed you and you hit your leg on something hard. It's not to blame, it's to understand what actually happened. You see, we have to have these conversations through the lens of understanding and mercy. Because really, everyone in your life who has contributed to your voices of negativity is because they too were influenced at some point by voices of negativity. Voices are transferred to those whose ears are accessible and receptive. They didn't realize the impact that their words would have on your actions and on how you would see yourself. So I want you to understand that the voice of fear wants to rob you of victory in this area by silencing your voice. But never forget, we overcome by the power of our testimony. Your experiences can help the next person or family to not have to go through the same thing. How many people's victory is delayed because of your silence? So often we think, I need to cover up for this person, but really, you're preventing your own healing process and possibly the other person's as well. It's funny, you would be amazed at how many family members are relieved when people bring out those things into the open that have been hidden or not talked about for so long for the purposes of healing and understanding. Now, there are levels to this. I generally don't encourage people to start sharing their testimony from a place of pain, but rather from a place of victory. So go through the process first And when you have peace, that's when it's generally best to go ahead and start sharing your testimony with others. So if you're avoiding this journey because of the fear of what will happen to your relationships or how you will be judged, that is a voice. That will give you insight, though, as to the fact that you're actually still under the control of the voice of people pleasing and the voice of predicting the worst, versus you actually being sold out to God's voice and ensuring that it's Him that's leading you in what you do. It's your choice. It's your destiny. It's not easy, but it definitely is worth it. So the other question is, how do you know when that voice has been uprooted? Well, it's similar to how you know when you've truly forgiven someone. Your instinctual responses will just be different. And hopefully you've cultivated self-awareness whereby you're aware of your body sensations, your feelings, just kind of what's going on with you in the moment. If so, then you'll begin to notice that your body it doesn't tense up or feels like off in the same way when those typical things that would usually trigger, those voices occurs. So you won't feel off. You're just going to be neutral. You'll notice like, oh, it doesn't bother me anymore, or there's just more of a positive response. So it's pretty straightforward. You will know. However, I will say that oftentimes what will happen is once that voice has been uprooted, it will just randomly appear when you least expect it. And so where is that even coming from? Because people will then begin to question, did I actually overcome this thing? Why is it still popping up? Well, those thoughts, which I'm referring to as voices, are not tangible. They're spiritual. We don't have these thoughts like in some database in our brain that you can just crack open and see. So we have to acknowledge that because they are spiritual, that whatever operates in the spiritual realm can influence you. We know Peter was crazy for Jesus, but then all of a sudden he just started speaking against Jesus's plan. And if we were there, we would just think, well, Peter's just speaking on his own accord. But we know that based on Jesus's response, there was a voice influencing his words, which was the voice of Satan. So let's not forget that when we are told to take thoughts that go against God's word into captivity and make them obedient unto Christ, it's because Satan and his crew are constantly trying to feed you with thoughts and trap you, because they know that if that thought takes root, if you grab hold of it and take ownership of it, it will produce fruit that will become the voice of influence for you to do whatever they wanted you to do. So be mindful that we must always keep in mind and remember, not every thought that you have is your own. It's the reason why you have so many random thoughts, right? And even the thoughts that appear to be neutral, they're not. There are no neutral thoughts. It's either adding life or adding death, period. So it's very important that you learn to manage your thoughts, which represent a voice. I mean, why would you put forth all this effort to go forth and be great for Jesus and fulfill your calling when all these internal voices are just sabotaging all your efforts and all your progress? Yeah, this process, it is not easy. I'm trying to break this down as best as I can because it is critical for you to get started and never give up on this process. It really is the most important investment you can make in yourself. It's a total game changer. This process has taken me from being stuck in a place of depression and anxiety for years to now living out the freedom that God has ordained for me to live in. And there are still thoughts that challenge me. There are still things that pop up that I have to overcome. It's a lifelong commitment. You have many layers of voices, so just give yourself time to unpack them. It's not an overnight 8-week process. Some layers won't actually be activated until you conquer the first layer and then the second layer, or maybe you have certain experiences. And so it's a journey. But what's so beautiful is what I can see. I can see a version of you that is so full of joy, so full of hope, so full of peace and love. I see you redefining what it means to live your best life. Where material things they're nice, but prosperity that you have in your spiritual and emotional and relational being, that just outweighs everything. I see you being an overcomer. You will have the victory in this area, so don't give up. Just go through that process. You have the time, and when you do, I would love to hear your story. So feel free to email me or just share it on this platform if you're comfortable. All right, you know what time it is. This is the time where we get to discuss a phrase, a pattern, or belief that has been a hindrance to many in the culture, and if we eradicate it, it will improve your life, your family, and the community.
It's chain breaking time.
The phrase for this week is, "It's not that serious." Now, this is a common phrase that's used when one person thinks the other person is blowing something out of proportion or just taking it too seriously. But remember, the purpose of communicating isn't to be right, it's for there to be understanding. Saying it's not that serious will immediately put someone on the defensive because what they hear is, my feelings are not valid, or I'm not capable of distinguishing between what matters and what doesn't. Let's not minimize other people's feelings. Even if it's not that serious, to them it is. So what would be a better response? Well, that just depends on who's speaking, the situation, and your relationship to that person. It may be best to just say, I can see this is really important to you. How can I help? Or, I'm glad you're sharing this with me so I can understand how you feel. There are a gazillion of other responses that are much healthier than telling a person it's not that serious. If you have other responses that can be helpful in this situation, please share it in the comments. But please, let's empower people to communicate, not minimize their feelings when they do. Let me close out with a word of encouragement. You got this. You have so much more power than you realize. Those moments where you feel powerless or limited, it's really just a voice that needs to be uprooted and replaced with truth. So just be sure to surround yourself with voices of encouragement and those people who will speak the truth to you in love. Let other people pour into you as you pour into those around you. And just, pray that your eyes will be open to the people who are already in your life that can be a source of encouragement and give you the strength to go through this process. I said it earlier, and I will repeat it again and again and again. You are more than a conqueror in Christ Jesus, and you will have the victory in this area in your life. So may the Lord God bless you and keep you. Until next time, shalom.